So don't
All
say
right.
anything too crazy. so So this meetup is called Bakersfield Startup, and it's geared specifically for the early stage entrepreneur. And the whole goal behind this is to help early stage entrepreneurs as they're beginning their journeys to go from the idea to a minimum viable product to having something that's actually out in the market in the wild, tested with customers. And one of the biggest hurdles that a lot of entrepreneurs face is, how am I going to get money to do this venture that I want to do, right? And it is a big problem to face. But one of the things I found is that the problem is made larger than it actually is, right? A lot of founders worry about funding and they don't even have a product. They don't have any customers. And so today we want to talk about funding. So there's so many different ways that you can do funding. As an entrepreneur running a co-working space, I'll just kind of drill down some of the ways that I was able to raise funding for this particular business. And then we're going to have a discussion with Ivan and Alvin, who both have worked with many startups, and they have done seed round fundraising or seed plus fundraising, and they can give their perspective from there. And so when it comes to fundraising, and you guys can join in the conversation as well, there's a term called bootstrapping. I'm sure we've heard of that. And so essentially bootstrapping is where you're not taking, if I believe correctly, you're not taking institutional investment, you're not taking seed investment. Is that correct, guys?
Yeah. Yeah. Just starting from
Yes,
scratch.
that's right. Yeah, bootstrapping is basically like you're doing all the work, right? You're putting your own money in, and um you're trying to get to the point where it's like you're you can prove something. Like you can prove that you have a potential business.
Right. And so, and this is one overlooked funding source that people forget about. And one of the ways that you can fund your startup, it's not recommended, but if you've worked for a company for 5, 10, 15 years, you can use portion of your 401k or your 403b or some of your stock options that you got from your company. And so it really comes down to your tolerance for risk and how much you believe in the idea that you're doing. Some people don't have that tolerance for risk, right? Some people just can't do it. And so they would rather utilize, what is it, OPPM, other people, OPM, other people's money. But there are some who can tolerate that risk level and liquidate some of their assets in order to fund their business. And that was one of the things I did when I transitioned from working full time to running this business. I had a small portion of a retirement account that I saved up. Now, one thing that I wish I would have done, I wish I would have realized when was the vesting period for that, because I missed it by a few months. And I would have had about double the amount than when I had when I left. So pay attention to those vesting time periods. And another thing that you can do is start small, right? Um, I believe his name is, it's not Alexander Osterwald, but his name is, he did the lean, the business model canvas. Steve Blank, right? He talks about and even the lean startup guy, Eric Ries, he talks about your minimum viable product. And so that means creating a product, it doesn't have all the features, it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, it doesn't have everything that you would like to have, but it's just enough so that you can prove the concept, get it in front of a customer, and start generating funds. And so if you're able to fund your startup by your sales, it limits the amount of money that you need in order to keep your business functioning and keep your business going. Have you guys ever worked on startups where it was purely funded from sales, or you guys started small and kind of worked your way up?
Never. Yeah, I think, yeah. So it's yeah. So I think, I mean, if you're, I guess it's really hard. I guess I'll use the company that I'm working now as an example, where it's like, okay, what's the goal? The goal is to start an insurance company. To start an insurance company, you need a lot of money. But like the way we were able to start is that, like, as I explained before, like you start as a brokerage business. And even that is expensive because there's a lot of I guess regulations that you have to abide by, and you have to like take certain tests to become a broker, pay the fees, and do a lot of work, a lot of paperwork that also unfortunately requires a lot of money. But yeah, like that was our version of starting small, but like it required initially for some friends and family to invest. But it varies by company. So you know, if you're in a situation where you don't necessarily have to take a salary, and maybe you're a technical person, it's really easy to say like, okay, like I have this cash saved up on the side, and I can pay myself with that over the course of you know, whatever timeline you have, and then build the MVP yourself, and then just prove something there. But yeah, that's probably I guess the non-funding way of starting.
Right. Alvin, do you have any of those experiences?
Yeah.
No.
So yes and no. Mine's gonna have a little bit of bias here because it is in the software space, and there's lower barriers to entry. Like now, just the upfront investment of either hours, like at time or resources, like requires some initial capital, and that's looking at the $100 to $1 million, like to get something off the ground. There's I wouldn't call them startups, like products that ended up being profitable, or just little things like that, like developing a mobile app, throwing it on the app store, not as a full-time like business focus, but those are like situations I can myself get into, like very lightweight, pay $100 for an Apple developer license, and then make as many apps as I want on my own time, and get those out there. But they're not, I wouldn't really consider the app itself a business. It's just like almost like a little portfolio kind of item.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really depends on the business and kind of what your intentions are. If you want to get into that $1 million revenue range and higher, like you'll most likely need to take some money in, because just getting to that time period is going to take a long time if you try to do it without any capital.
Yeah. So, and that's something important to know. You know, what's your goal? What's your target?
Right.
How big do you want your company to be? There are companies that are called lifestyle companies, and those are companies where it just generates enough money to allow the founders to have a comfortable lifestyle. And there are other companies which are, I guess they call them high growth companies, where they're looking to grow exponentially and make their investors, do investors typically look for 100x on their investment? Is that venture capital?
5x or more, just something that's going to beat your normal market returns or any other like cash flow business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was way off on that one.
Yeah.
I don't know
I
where.
mean,
I mean,
if you come in as an angel and get a Facebook out of it, then yeah, you're gonna be in the 100,000x. But yeah,
yeah, I mean, even 2x is good, right? If you like, I don't know, invest $500,000 into a company, then now you have $1 million whenever it gets acquired, or probably not IPO, because and that's like probably 50x at that point. But yeah, and like to your point, it depends on your goal. Like, if your goal is to um, create a startup where it's like you want to get a high return, very likely you're going to need venture capital, because otherwise what happens is, like, if you're waiting to bring in some revenue to be able to, I don't know, deploy an app or hire people to help you do things quicker, it's going to be a really slow process. And at that point, it's not really a high growth company. It's just a regular company. So it takes money to grow fast, basically. And that's why venture capitalists exist, because they put in money and with the expectation that they'll get a high return relatively soon.
And then you have those companies that were completely bootstrapped, that ended up IPOing, but those would probably be the exception and not the rule. Would you guys say that?
yeah, and it's
I would say so, yeah.
it's very rare. No, I can't think of any off the top of my head, like at this point in time. But yeah, I haven't haven't heard of one of those in a while.
Like, for example,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it is an IPO company, but you think of like Patagonia, right? It's an outdoor brand. And I remember listening to a podcast about that particular owner, and I think he still retains 100% of the company. I don't think he took any outside investment. I don't know how much it's worth. Maybe you guys can fact check that really quick. Let me think. I can't think of the other top of my head, but there are some companies out there that have been able to grow. And I don't know if they're like high growth companies, but I would imagine there's some out there. We can follow that up with some research. And so we want to dive into three other areas, and then we'll go into the discussion about the angel and VC funding. So the other avenue that you can look at for investment is what they call the F and F, friends, family, fools, right? So, or I should say friends, family, and then supporters. But that is one area that a lot of people have been able to raise money. And it's personally, I have not done, well, not for the business. Personally, I have not done that, but I know some people who have done that and been successful with it. But it's a challenge to borrow money from your mom or your dad or your cousin or your uncle, and you go and see them at a family function and your business is not doing well, and how do you tell them I can't pay you back? Right? That's a hard one. And so, as I was saying earlier, it all goes down to your risk tolerance and how confident you are in the business and what is your vision for the company. Some other areas that were really, really important, at least last year, was the payment protection program, and then the programs developed by the Small Business Administration for business that experienced economic injury during COVID. And so I would say for anyone who's launching a business, maybe this year or next year, you may not be able to take advantage of those things just because you had to been impacted by COVID while you were already running your business. So you may not be able to take advantage of that. But there's another website, opengrants.io. One of my friends, he has that. And what he seeks to do is to pair startups with these different grant opportunities for their startups. There's another one, there's an organization called Kite in town, and they're working on a resource for entrepreneurs aware as well to put together all the different opportunities for them. And so we'll be hearing more about that in the future. And so those are all the ways that I've personally used. But now I want to dive into these two founders. Well, founders, you guys are considered founders, right? Co-founder.
For all intents and purposes, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay. So just I want you guys to say a quick blurb about yourselves again for the video, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Okay. I suppose I can start again. Yeah, so I'm Ivan. Currently working at Seago. I'm the technical person there. We are an insurance company. Before that, I worked at One Step, which is a company startup in the addiction space. And before that, 1 month, which was another startup in the education space. Throughout those 3 startups, I worked as the technical person or at some technical capacity.
All right. Name's Alvin. I've also been involved with startups for the last few years of different industries and sizes. At the moment, I'm the key, I guess, technical partner for a few companies that some are self-funded, some are sales cycle funded, and some are going through a VC fund, typical VC fundraising round. And I can talk about those later. Yeah. Later
Okay, perfect.
this, yeah.
Perfect. So both of you have different experiences. Ivan, he participated in he was in one company that was alum of Techstars. And so do you want to share a little bit about that that experience of going through the Techstars accelerator, correct? What was that process like? What was the process like, pitching your idea to the investors, and then what was the, ongoing support and resources you got by being a part of that network?
Yeah. So at One Step, we were a part of I think 2018 winter cohort at Techstars in New York City. So I think if I were to boil it down to like what Techstars helped us do, it's 2 things. The first thing is refining your pitch and structuring it in a way that like investors expect it, and also connecting you to a network of investors. So I would say like those are probably 2. If you're looking for funding, those are probably 2 of the main ways to, I guess, improve your chances of getting institutional investments for your company.
Right, understanding how to pitch, and then also developing a network of potential investors to pitch to.
Right.
And so, dive a little deeper. So what, you guys did get funding, right, from Techstars.
Yeah.
And from the companies that were in your cohort that you saw that got funding, what do you think was, a characteristic? You mentioned pitching and the network. Was there anything else?
Yeah. So I guess one that comes to mind now is a company called Alltrue, which recently got acquired by another company that I can't remember the name of. But they were so basically they were I guess one of the founders was worked at a big company. He saw this need for I guess enabling employers to develop a brand for employees. Probably the best way. I'm hoping I'm not describing this wrong, but basically what it is, if I were to put it differently, is a way for, like, for example, a big company like Unilever enabling their employees to record videos And that way, if a potential employee wants to apply there, they can see what the company is on the inside, what the company culture is like, and see if they're a good fit. So that's kind of what the company was. And probably what stood out to me, at least from the technical person, because I was closer to him, the CTO, his ability to be able to put like a business plan together from a technical perspective. So I think being able to translate like, okay, what are the technical requirements? How do I map this out so I can present it to an investor? I think that's a really important skill to have to find funding. And then also the fact that he was previously in a company before that that also got acquired, I'm almost certain helped a lot too. And yeah, so the companies that were in Techstars and Mike were you know, they were in very different spaces. I think a lot of these companies, a lot of these founders had a lot of conviction in what they were working on, and like, you know, you have to, like, if you're not completely sure about your company, like, you're probably not going to find funding. So yeah, I guess if I were to summarize this again, being able to communicate the business that you're trying to start, and being able to communicate what your plan is really important. And then also, you know, you have to really believe in the company that you're working on.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So Alvin, I wanted to kind of want you to chime in kind of from a different angle. And so, when do you think is a good time for a startup to start thinking about participating in an accelerator? Or, you know, is it not necessary to be a part of an accelerator? So what do you think are the criteria that a startup needs to evaluate before they make that decision to enter into an accelerator?
Okay, yeah. So again, all of it depends on the type of business you're going into. If you're going to be selling T-shirts, it's probably not, you know, the smartest thing. But for me, I think the biggest benefit of an accelerator is really onboarding the founding team with like a bunch of learning lessons. That's going to be the biggest gain you're going to get out of it. Not necessarily the financial like investment out of it, but it's the network and thought processes that they kind of, at least from what I've heard from Techstars, from business partners, they grill into you, so that they become habits as you develop your company or any other future companies. And then with accelerators or like incubators like that, those, if you need that as a founder, like if you're a first-time founder and don't have a network to really go out to, yeah, try to get into one of those if you can. Not even for the money, but just for that access, the knowledge, and being surrounded by people with a similar mentality to you.
So it really it accelerates your learning, and it helps your team to culturally, I wouldn't say culturally mature, but give you learnings that you need to kind of not make some of the mistakes that founders make early on because they just don't know.
Correct.
And so you said it depends on the type of company that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, for example, let's just use, because we're talking about Techstars, right? A company that will apply to Techstars, it typically will be a tech company, right? Most likely
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Techstars, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny because it's in its name, but I guess not necessarily. There was I guess most startups are tech companies, at least now, but it can also be like a I guess a biotech company, which one of the companies in my cohort was. But yeah, generally speaking, I think you can probably say like most of them are tech companies.
Or it has a component of technology that kind of helps it disrupt the industry, maybe.
Yeah, I would say that like what accelerators, investors, and other incubators are mostly interested in is I guess higher returns on their investment, right? So technology really enables that to happen, which is why a lot of tech companies are, or a lot of accelerators rather, are investing in tech companies. But like, for example, I know I am pretty certain that like, for example, Y Combinator would invest in a company that doesn't necessarily have to be tech, but it could be like high impact. Like if it does a lot of good for some people, then I think they'd be willing to invest in it. And yeah, so the way I would put it is accelerators and investors and incubators they're interested in companies that will give them a high return on their investment.
So very, very good. Thanks for the answer. So Alvin, so an accelerator is, one way to, get funding. And it's also one way to develop learning for your startup. And so for those startups who kind of go at it on their own, so to speak, maybe with experienced founders who had a previous successful or even a failed venture, and they decided, hey, we're going to start off with our round of fundraising where we're going to do our seed round. We're assuming it's a tech company. We're assuming it's at least a high growth company that will provide a reasonable return for the investors. Where should a founder or an entrepreneur start if they're seeking to do their seed round of funding?
Okay. Before, I guess, reaching out to potential investors, have your due diligence into your market that you're trying to get into, and what that looks like in the next 2 or 3 years. But what does that look like 10 years from now? And you're going to need two advantages. One is going to be speed and agility, or deep like domain expertise to be able to do that. There's a benefit to being in some of the bigger hubs like the Bay Area, New York, Austin, Boulder, I guess even now like Salt Lake and all that, where there's proximity, and just through that you're gonna, if you're employed somewhere else, like through those colleagues, like you'll have a way to get those intros. But it starts just with a bunch of soft kind of like leads to all this, and that slowly starts building up and up and up until you get to your ideal investor. And it does take a lot of time. Like day one when you start, it'll probably be like a bunch of emails and reaching out to people, texting like, do you know anyone who's looking to do this, or remember that one time, blah blah blah. But trying to see how to best be helpful here on how to best.
No, it's helpful. Helpful.
Now with kind of like the benefits of the internet, you do have almost like a free Rolodex, or like LinkedIn and Google, to look for people's Twitter, LinkedIn's, like even Facebooks and stuff that have gone through something similar, whether that's industry or got invested by a company that you want to get invested by or whatever. You can try to reach out to those and kind of lock all that in. So it's just get creative with it if you have nowhere to start with, if it's like your first day one of ever starting a company.
Okay, so I heard several things. So the first thing is, you have to understand your numbers. understand your market. Um, there's two words from, I believe it's the business model canvas, your TAM and your SAM, the
All right.
target, is that right? The target addressable market, the
Total
total addressable
addressable,
market,
and I don't know what the SAM one stands for,
I
but
think it's the selected addressable market or something like that.
mhm.
And so, yeah, definitely understanding your numbers. I've heard the term data room. Did you ever have to develop one of those?
Yeah. So that's usually kind of like an analytics warehouse, just a dump of all your files and info and research and kind of anything going on with your company from day one to as many rounds as you're going through, like that gets built up. And those are usually shared with investors once there's like interest, or even you'll know when it's right to share it. But it's just, yeah, ongoing set of documents that you build up that include projections, any current expenses, any opportunities, and things like that.
So yeah, I would imagine investors is going to want to see your numbers. They want to see your documents, want to see the support you have. So um, I would imagine that you should have that stuff ready.
Yeah, and that's where something like Techstars will kind of let you know which main areas to focus on, and how to like best present it. But yeah, if with nowadays, like you can do everything on a computer, so you naturally get the ability to log all that kind of stuff and put it all in a nice little clean folder.
So from there, once you have have all your data together, um, then you can start your search for your perfect investor. Now,
Mhm.
um, the stage of the company, should the company already be generating revenues, or can they be pre-revenue, or there's that word that I always hear, do they need to have some level of traction before starting to reach out to investors?
Uh, yeah, all of those are applicable. The When targeting an investor that's looking for high growth, you're not really, the revenues now don't even matter. They're probably going to get in the way. You're really selling a long-term vision, of what that end market looks like, and that's where they're going to get on the pure financial side that return. How you get there right now, it's the product you have on day one is not going to be the product or set of products or companies you have on day of acquisition, IPO, or whatever it's going to be. Um, for more traditional kinds of businesses, say you were doing something on manufacturing or something along those sorts, like you can go try to get funding without any revenue, because there are a lot of upfront costs. Like say you need a warehouse or a bunch of equipment, and you can't really bring in revenue without any of that. For a tech, like say a software based company, uh, you can build something out small right away to gauge market interest. Product market fit is a common term, and that also doesn't necessarily have to bring in revenue, but just knowing there's a number or just kind of any data point there can be more useful than actual revenues coming in. Where revenues tend to get more important is once you start going to like the series A, B, C's, and D's, and you found customers at that point. Now you just need to kind of fine tune or just go all out on growth and try to get as many as you can to then, yeah, figure out how to make those profitable and whatever financial model you build out.
Okay. And so when you're approaching investors, as you said,
Mhm.
all are applicable. You can be pre pre-revenue, you can have, some traction, you can have
Mhm.
existing customers. And so the next phase of this is, I'm going to start reaching out to investors, right? Now I've heard that a warm introduction is already always better than a cold introduction to an investor. Um, has that been your guys' experience?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, like most things in life, like a say a job reference or
Yeah.
friends or whatever, yeah, it's gonna be. There's usually some familiar ground to go off of that shortcuts a lot of stuff or vets a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, like a ton of people are going to investors for money. I think they probably like have enough warm introductions to sift through, and there are very likely not going to respond to cold emails or cold calls. So warm introductions are definitely, I don't want to say necessary, but like it almost feels like it, which is why like an accelerator or an incubator are really valuable, because they kind of serve as like a vetting process for investors. So if an investor wants to invest in a company, they're going to look towards these incubators and accelerators before they start reaching out to just random companies that approach them, or or just companies like out there in general.
Makes sense, because if you go through, and Alvin said this earlier, if you go through a Techstars, there is, and if you go through Techstars or any accelerator, there is a regimented programming and learning, and that investor can expect, within some degree of variance between startups, that there's going to be the same, level of training, the same things that each one of those startups receives. And so if they invested in this company that was successful at Techstars, then maybe this company might be successful as well. Now, obviously that's not the case, but I would imagine that it increases their odds of success if they have, this company that's gone through this accelerator. So
Yeah. And then I'll
ahead.
also say this, my wife works at a startup, and I think they were able to get funding a lot easier because they had a lot of warm introductions. And then I'll use my company, the current company that I'm at, as an example. It's been really difficult because for a lot of reasons, but some of those reasons are that we don't have a network of investors that are willing to invest in our type of company.
Yeah, so that can be challenging when you do not have a network. And so what do you do?
What do you do? That's I think that's where accelerators and incubators come in, right? I think that is, as I said earlier, accelerators and incubators, they will help you refine your pitch and introduce you to a set of investors that might be interested in investing in your company. And the reason that's important is because like investors like typically, I guess, don't have much time to listen to you, right? That's why they're called elevator pitches, because you're expected to tell them like really quickly. But yeah, like if they even take a call with you, it's really important that like you present your company and all the information pertaining to your company in a way they expect it, so that they don't like get bogged down by trying to figure out like, okay, I'm interested in these numbers, and I don't know where, I don't know if they mentioned it or maybe I missed it. So it's all a process. It's like, I would almost say that like just go online and look for a pitch deck template, and it's likely something that that most investors are expecting, and just use that. Like, don't try to do anything different. Just stick to the template, and that will likely be good to present to an investor.
Yeah, don't try to reinvent the wheel. So now driving down specifically, right? So we talked kind of abstractly about a fundraise. So what was, so Alvin, your company just completed a fundraise, and you can either talk about the current one that your startup that you're part of, or maybe a previous one or another one, but what was your experience at any one of your companies that did a round of fundraising? How easy or difficult was it?
Yeah. So yeah, for the one that we're wrapping up right now, it was challenging in the beginning, mostly because of the space we were in or are in. Fintech. There's 2-3 years ago when we reached out to potential investors about this, there was a few kind of things that turned them off. One was they didn't understand kind of the potential of the financial model. Or right now, everyone kind of understands what payment for order flow is nowadays. But 3 years ago, most VCs weren't really aware of that concept. I mean, didn't know how profitable it could be. Also, with this space, there's to become a FINRA regulated broker. There's a huge deposit needed for clearing houses and a bunch of other things that to a potential investor, knowing their fund is just going to sit in a bank account for safe measures and not be used to grow the company, is going to shy them away from what's happening. So there was a lot of like, yeah, kind of, I don't know, cold shoulders or just like no further interest like after first talk. And that was a learning lesson for us. And we had to spend the year not just like going through the product and iterating on it, but like if we wanted to reapproach that type of fundraising round again just a few months ago, now that we know all that, like how do we best do that? And that involved communicating at the language that they speak of. We can't necessarily sell the product as it is to an investor, especially one as complicated as like options trading. So you need to communicate at their language, and that's where they will like that will go a long way. General like situations, it's gonna take up a lot of time. It's gonna pretty much eat up the whole founding team's bandwidth. If you decide to go down like this investment round, because there's just a lot of conversations like that need to start happening, some that don't make it through, some that you're just waiting on a lot of responses from people that aren't as interested or kind of give you slow no's, which are always the worst. But this is where it helps to have a good founding team. If you try to do this all by yourself, like you're gonna just be a full-time fundraiser and not really building the company out. So having at least someone, how to say, back home, like
Yeah.
continuing to grow the business in whatever shape or form that's going to be, whether it's still research and finding customers or understanding potential markets, but yeah, you still need someone to keep it going. Because it takes forever. There's where the value of having an existing network like is really useful. There's friends and colleagues and stuff that have been able to get a good amount of initial fundraising in like 24 hours, just because of who they know and how they can communicate, and they know how to shortcut a bunch of things. If it's your first time going at it as a team, it can take 6 to 12 months. One, just because you're starting cold. There's no one to really reach out to right away, but you're also going to learn kind of the game, the dance, like the language and all that you're gonna need to speak to. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a process, and it sounds like you guys had to come at it a second time around and kind of re-evaluate the strategy when communicating to investors. It sounds like you said that communicating in a language that they understand. I think Alvin was touching on that earlier. I think that's exactly what he was saying. How, you know, just give them what they're looking for. Communicate it in a way that they don't have to do extra things to understand what you're trying to communicate. Now, Alvin, do you think there was like maybe one turning point in your fundraising, or one breakthrough that kind of helped you guys get to that next fundraising milestone or that next investor to help you to eventually
Yeah. So you guys have you seen the Silicon Valley show?
yeah.
Yeah, when they kind of flip it back on the investors, and kind of become a-holes back at them. Not necessarily that specifically, but we decided to be a lot pickier on who we reached out to as investors, and wanted one that understood, that invested in similar kinds of businesses and understood what we're trying to do. Like, we're not going to be focused on a high growth, like capture all the market right away model that most of them want. We're very selective with who we bring in to the platform, because that allows us to focus to build like a product for that specific user and really get them hooked. Then down the line, we'll slowly start opening that stuff up. So getting the investor to understand that is going to help a lot. And that once those expectations are set, it then makes it a lot easier to move to the next step. So yeah, when we became pickier on our end, that helped a lot, because it reduced the amount of time of who we're looking out for, and how long we're in chats, and allowed us to speed up the product development and everything else as well.
So there's a word that's thrown around a lot when you're talking about investors and investing, and that word is FOMO.
Yeah.
Is that it, guys? Is that a real thing for investors? And do entrepreneurs have to like create this feeling? By the way, FOMO stands for fear of missing out. So do entrepreneurs have to kind of use this psychological game to make investors feel like they're going to miss something if they don't invest in their company?
Yeah, that's part of what I mean by, yeah, talking the language and playing the game. There's a perspective that kind of needs to be communicated, a sense of urgency of like, I'm reaching out to you to do this. What really shows kind of that in effect is that, like, as soon as you get one lead investor, all those ones that said no 3 months ago all coming back like, all right, we want in as well. So it's yeah, it's just, yeah, I'd say it's true.
Did you experience that too? Oh, go ahead, Ivan.
It's like usually what ends up happening is, in our case, once we've reached like $1 million in total funding over the life of the company, investors all of a sudden seem to be a little bit more interested, and that's probably because of the FOMO. It's like they see that this particular company is being funded to a certain amount, and then like they suddenly feel the urgency to like, okay, what am I missing here, and should I be putting in my money too? So yeah, definitely exists. It's definitely something you should take advantage of, I would say.
Got it. Okay, so what we've heard so far from Alan is, you have to know how to, speak to the audience.
Yeah.
Ivan was saying the same thing. Any resources you guys would recommend specifically for that, around how the entrepreneur pitches his business, or how the entrepreneur communicates to the investor in such a way that it enables him or her to have a better chance of success? Any resources you guys would recommend?
Just go and do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say the Y Combinator YouTube channel is really good.
Okay.
Yeah, and just from I guess my experience, like, accelerators have always been helpful, if you can get into them.
Got it. So let's we're going to just kind of wind down, and I want to talk a little bit more tactical questions, and then we're going to close out. So a startup wants to, so this is what I want to ask you guys. So a company that wants to go from, 0 to their first 100,000, and then from 100,000 to their first million, and then from their first million to 5 million. It's not necessarily in fundraising, but in revenue for that particular company. So would you guys say that a company needs to do to go from, what are the important things that a company needs to do to go from like 0 to the $100,000 mark? What are some important things?
Find customer number one would be my thing, and in whatever way that's going to be. You don't have to sell them a product right away. It could be, in some businesses, a letter of intent to purchase something. Nowadays, like you can even do like was it crowdsourcing, like what's that company called? Crowdfunding, yeah, like Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's like you can gauge interest that way by just developing a prototype, like visually or whatever, throw it out there, and that interest also comes in the form of fundraising through Kickstarter. So that kind of helps speed some of that stuff up. A little bit is dependent on the business. Like, I mean, if you sell, I don't know, high end goods, like you only need one sale to say make your 100K. But if you're selling like bolts and nuts, you're gonna need someone to buy like tons of that stuff before you get to that number. But finding customer one is what you should start with, because then they probably know other similar customers as well, and from there you start growing 1, 10, 100, and yeah, really tailor what you're doing to them. It's going to be early on almost like you're freelancing or like consulting or whatever, because you only have one person that you're kind of tailoring to.
Right. Ivan, you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on each specific company, but like if I could say something here, or something that I've found in common, is iterate quickly on whatever it is that you're building, and yeah, that way, and be really close to your customer. Ideally, if it should be something that you're using personally, because if it's really useful to you and you're using it daily, then it's likely useful to a lot of other people too. But yeah, it really depends. In our case, insurance is something that we need, that everybody needs. I think the main challenge here is like just getting people to fill out a form to get insurance. So iterating through that initial like application flow where they sign up or enter all their information, iterating through that quickly is really helpful.
Yeah, and like I think what you said is important, to know your customer. And I think it's, as an entrepreneur, it's really good. It's really easy to really fall in love with your idea. But the reality is that ideas that have no market are just like little hobbies, right? If someone is not willing to pay you for your idea, for your business, you have a nice hobby, you got a nice little project, but unless people are willing to pay you for it, then you don't have a business. And until you get that first customer, you don't have a business. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs get hung up on, I got to have my business cards, I got to have my website, I got to have my logo, I got to have my legal entity, I have to have, my intellectual property, I got to have my non-disclosure agreements, I got to have my office space, I got to have the logo on the back of my car. All the while I haven't sold one product or met one single customer. And there's a book that I read called Ready. I think it's called Ready, Fire, Aim. And he talks about the minimum sales strategy, or the optimum selling strategy. And he says you should get to selling something as soon as possible. Because believe it or not, even in the digital age, there are people who have no digital presence whatsoever, and they're doing, multi-million-dollar businesses. I mean, they could probably do better with a website, but they figured out where their customers were and they were able to market to their customers. And so I think a lot of people get hung up on the trappings of a business, or looking like a business, or a business lifestyle, rather than the actual lifeline of a business, which is having profits.
Yeah, I would say really think about it strategically. You don't necessarily need an office space.
You need office space.
No invest. I don't want to like
Conflict of interest.
offend anybody here, but you don't need like no investor's gonna sign an NDA. You don't need to look legit. Just build something and let people use it, and you will know, like, okay, maybe now I need an office space because I'm gonna need to put my employees somewhere. Now I need an NDA because we're working on some really good stuff, and I already have investors, and like just be lean. If whatever it is that you're trying to build, just start building it. You don't even have to like initially become an official business. Like just build it and then let people use it, and then you'll know, is this a potential business?
So, and we're not advocating doing anything illegal. You want to have your proper things in place, but I think when you're starting out and testing your business, don't get caught up on all the legal entities, the websites, and all that stuff. Just figure out who your customer is. And the way you do that is by creating your minimum viable product and start introducing it to your market. And so, okay, so
I would even say, like, if you're not a business person and you're not sure like what kind of legal entity you should be, like there's like a lot of services out there like Clerky that will help you with that. But just make sure make sure that you don't do anything too extensive before you start like raising money, because it could become a challenge later that like, okay, like I did these things a certain way. Now I have to spend thousands of dollars for lawyers to look at it to make sure that like our investors are okay with it. So that's why Clerky is really, or services like Clerky are really helpful and valuable. But yeah, like don't put too much thought into it. Just use what's there. A lot of times, like investors invest a specific structure or expect a specific structure in your company. Just use that. Like don't reinvent the wheel, as we've said before.
Yeah, and Clerky is a service that allows you to it automates the process of creating a Delaware C Corp. It manages the cap table as well, correct? Capitalization table?
I think so. But if not, there's also like services like Carta that does that.
I think Stripe Atlas is another one that has popped up recently as well. Yeah.
Okay. So and those are good tools. And definitely, if you're looking to be a high growth startup, or looking to provide multiples of multiples of investment for your investors, you definitely need to form the right entity. And the gold standard is the Delaware C Corp. I know. Have you guys heard differently in terms of entity formation, or or can you get away with an LLC in whatever state that you're in at some point?
Yeah, I wouldn't even go that far. Like, until you bring in $10,000, it's not worth like doing any of that. Yeah, you can just do personal income and classify it as a business expense at that point. And then once you bring in enough money where an LLC makes sense, say $100,000 to $500,000, then you get to spin one up locally. It doesn't even need to be in Delaware at that point, because then it gets complicated. But beyond that 500 to millions range, like you can have the revenue to have someone do this for you anyway. So it's gonna, you do it as late as you can. Like it's not something you want to do day one. You don't want to be like 5K like out before you even start anything.
Right, because forming like an LLC, to form an LLC, you could do it yourself, it's not a lot of money, but you're gonna have to pay $800 every single year to the franchise tax board.
California.
And if you're in California,
Mhm.
and if you don't keep track of those expenses because you're doing it on a budget, that $800 can add up with penalties. And so, yeah, it's very good advice. So we probably won't go to the 5 million range, but let's just talk about from the 100 to 1 million or the 5 or half a million range. So what is the thing that differentiates a company that's doing the 100 to the 500 to the $1 million range? What do you guys see a company needs to do to make it to that next level?
In terms of revenue, you're saying?
Revenue, yes.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like, it really, I think it really depends again on the type of company that you're doing. And I'll just say this because I'm familiar with my company. In our case, we started first as a brokerage because it was cheaper than starting an insurance company, right? So initially, before I joined, actually, like what our founders did is that they went out and literally in front of a grocery store and kind of gauged interest on like what gauged interest on on an insurance company that's like fully tech enabled and specifically for the Hispanic population. And that's what they did. That's like how they got their first couple customers. In fact, I think at that point they technically didn't even have any customers. But eventually I guess they found that there was some interest there, and so they started by becoming a brokerage. So a brokerage is again a person or a company that sells insurance for other insurance companies. And so that was the next step. That was logically the next best thing to do. And so they started selling insurance that way. They tried to prove that they can grow 20% month over month. And once we figured out like, okay, this is definitely not gonna be sustainable or not gonna allow us to grow fast enough, then that's whenever you say like, let's do an MGA business, which will allow us to automate a lot of these processes and allow us to say it again.
Said MGA.
MGA, Managing General Agency. So basically what that is you work with what's called a reinsurer. And basically you're an insurance company that works with other insurance companies, reinsurers, to like spread the risk among other entities instead of just your own company.
Got it.
And then guess what the next step up from MGA is? It's an insurance carrier. So which is like your own company that like takes on most of the risk. Even big insurance companies, presumably like Geico, Allstate, and State Farm, work with reinsurers, but most of the risk it stays with them rather than other insurance companies.
Okay. So it depends.
It depends,
So,
yeah.
It's
but
not
with-
gonna be, yeah, it's not gonna be easy if there
Well,
was
tell me this.
a formula.
Okay.
Like it'd be, everyone would be doing
Now, how important is it to have a team when you want to scale your business up to the next stage or the next revenue milestone? Or can a founder do it all by themselves?
Most investors will not invest in solo founders. So I guess if your goal is to create a company that will grow very fast and provide a high return on investment, then likely you will have to work with somebody else. Usually the combination is like a CEO and a CTO, depending on what kind of company you have, but like in most cases, that's the case, where it's like one person's focusing on business and the other person is focusing on tech. In our case, there's a CEO, a COO, and then there's me. And then there's also the insurance guy, our insurance expert that we have. But initially it was just three of us, and one of them focused on fundraising mostly. The other focused on running the actual brokerage business, and then I focused on building the tech to support that business.
Awesome, awesome. So Alvin,
Mhm.
last words. What would you say? What do we need to do to grow to the next stage?
Yeah. So, I mean, so say you're a 100K business, like if you're a restaurant in one town, like there's that kind of upper limit to
Yeah.
how many people you can have in the place at once, and like you can only be open 24 hours in a day. So there's like an upper bound to that kind of scenario. So for that kind of business, you can open up a secondary location or third or fourth, or look into other cities that might be bigger or can handle bigger restaurants. Like those are easier and harder. Like you know what to do, but the chances of success on that next part is a lot difficult. Restaurants are they're easy to understand and grasp, but it's just a hard business to run. So getting that thing going from 100K to a million is going to be very difficult unless you're like in LA or New York and are
Yeah.
featured and stuff. For say you have a very niche market that you sell stuff on Etsy to, the same problem there. Like it's a lot fuzzier, and reaching out to each potential customer is going to eat up either a lot of marketing spend or time to find each one of those niche customers. For like a tech company, it's slightly easier there. So if you are bringing in, we'll start with 100. Kind of figure out what's gonna, if you want to get to that 500, what that's gonna be. It's if it's a sales kind of acquisition issue, you know where to focus like on stuff there. If you're a founding team of 2 and you need more employees, then do you take a pay cut, get a few more to help you to run stuff while you go and bring in like different lines of like revenue or try to get more customers in. Yeah, all of this is very contextual. Like it's no business is the same. And I don't want to keep using the it depends, but if I could simplify it, just reach out to customers and advisors and more, just try to get as much info as you can to figure out what your next step is going to be, and then move on that quickly once you decide.
Yeah. So, and I'll kind of add to this. So for you guys, I mean, for your companies, being being both tech companies, I would imagine that there are a few, numbers that you look at. So what is it? Your cost of customer acquisition. You guys look at that number. And then is your lifetime value of your customer. And so a lot of mom and pop shops, or a lot of small companies, they don't have the infrastructure to keep track of those numbers, right? They don't know how to keep track of that. They don't know the effectiveness of, their marketing channels. They don't know if, posting on Facebook or posting on Instagram or posting on LinkedIn is resulting in any customers. And so I think that's a part of the challenge with a lot of smaller customers. They don't have the technological know-how in order to extract that pertinent data from the things they're doing. And so, but I think knowing those two numbers, that will put you ahead in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah,
Say that.
yeah. So Ivan mentioned that most startups tend to be tech, and that's the primary reason is there you can monitor like the very first touching point all the way to the last one, where if it's retail or any of those sorts, there's gonna be gaps like from someone watching you on TV to shopping at your store. You're never really gonna know that on an individual level. You just know it maybe like from a city or a demographic versus like a Facebook or an Instagram where you get one specific ad only to me. Like they know I converted by this specific amount at this quickly, and that's why those companies, tech companies in that shape, can bring in those numbers, and why investors are always going to be interested in look and go in that direction.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys. Brett, I know you've been listening intently. Do you have any specific questions?
No, just that my business is more of a service business, so I have a little bit different kind of market focus. But I did have a startup prior to this that I had for 10 years, kind of in a similar field, but kind of with my new focus here, I'm focusing on customers that are more, well, to give a little backstory, I was what they call a HERS rater, which is a special building inspector. So I would go out in the field and inspect construction sites for services that the building inspectors didn't do, that were specifically targeted for energy efficiency requirements for building code. But the one thing I found in that industry is that sometimes, and it varied by city, that inspectors would sometimes sign off on the homes being finalized and without having these inspections done. So it's kind of I was losing out on some of the market, basically, just because the cities weren't following state regulations. So kind of what I'm doing now is shifting my focus to the front end and doing the energy compliance modeling, which is, and those documents that are required for people to get building permits in the very beginning. So people, they can't skip out on that one. So I've actually, over the past year, been doing some HVAC design work for a person in Idaho remotely. So I've already had this over a year now of traction and having work without, like you said, having the LLC or any of the other things. I've been able to show that I have maintained a clientele for over a year now. So now I am just starting to get those other things in order and say, okay, I'm going to actually, get the insurance, that I'll need to really expand this and take it to that next level. So I've been using pretty much equipment and software and stuff that I've already owned from the work I used to do, but hopefully just to get a little bit of funding, maybe to get some computer upgrades and to really know that I'm sound and stable to really grow it. So so that's where I'm at right now.
Good stuff. Well, thank you for chiming in, Brett. He's a member at Mesh. He's at Mesh right now.
Yep.
Well, thank you guys. I know this was kind of off the cuff a little bit, so I appreciate you guys being good sports. I am going to edit it, and I'll let you see anything before I post it. And you say, hey, cut that part out. I didn't sound right. Or my hair I wasn't showing my good side.
Like my COVID quarantine grow up.
The video recording.